Okay, so welcome everyone to the 11th meeting, I think it is, from Moving Forward Resource-Based Economy Learning Network. Tonight we're going to be hearing from Perry Gruber from Copiosis, who has been, mentioned in several posts on Facebook that I've seen as being a viable transition plan. And that's the reason that we decided to ask him to come and tell us something about what Copiosis is about. And I'm really excited to hear about this. I don't know anything about it. So, Perry, welcome and thank you for sharing this time with us.
Thank you for having me, everybody. It's great to see and feel the energy of everyone in the virtual room. I'm going to have to start coming to these more often because I love the energy that you guys are having here. Why don't we just jump into it, since I have 30 minutes and I think I'm going to take like 25 of it to make the presentation, and then I guess we're going to have questions and answers after that. So let me just set up my computer to present. And we'll make this full screen. Everyone see that okay?
I see a black screen.
Yeah, I'm going to start it in just a second. Okay, here we go.
Okay, looking good.
So I'm going to start with a 3-minute animated video that we created to give a general overview of what Copiosis is. Some of you may have already seen this video, but it does present a good idea, a great idea of why we're creating Copiosis and then what it talks about. And then I'll go into more detail with the presentation. So let's get started.
Our current global society provides basic necessities only to those who can pay for them. Restricting basic necessities only to those who can afford them forces people to make decisions they don't want to make to get what they need. We call this earning a living, and for instance, holds true for a combat soldier or a coal miner just trying to get the basics for their family, like food, clothing, shelter, education, or healthcare. And while our political and government systems themselves are sometimes well-meaning, solutions from these institutions often make matters worse. All around the world, we pay people with money. But every form of money existing today is amoral. It can be used for good or bad. Money immorality only compounds our problems inherent in the current system. Now imagine living in a world where everyone has all the basic necessities of life at no cost, where there's zero reward for hatred, wars, or other negative outcomes, where everyone who strives only to provide benefits to other people or to the planet, where only actions that are good and can help the world get rewarded. Introducing Copiosis. In Copiosis, everyone is debt-free and can't get into debt ever. All amoral currencies are replaced by a virtual reward called Net Benefits Reward, NBR. In Copiosis, basic necessities such as food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare will be available to everybody worldwide at no cost, while those making things are rewarded through a global reward system that defines and measures beneficial human actions. Beneficial human actions are calculated as the good you've created minus the bad you've done along the way. This calculation determines your pay, as well as your ability to access luxuries. Society's interests are represented by a non-governmental institution called the Payer Organization. It comprises tens of millions of people dispersed worldwide who monitor human activity, then use an algorithm to measure and reward only beneficial human actions. Copiosis allows everyone to pursue their true passions, which result in very high-quality decision-making and productive human output. And the only regulations needed to make Copiosis function are a law which legalizes Copiosis and the principles which make it work as our new socioeconomic model. The transition process is underway. Finally, we don't have to wait for our leaders to make the world we want. We can do it ourselves. Learn more at patreon.com/copiosis.
Okay, so RBE enthusiasts share a passion, I think you guys would agree with this, for a future that's not like we have today. Making that change depends not only on a sound idea that can solve enormous problems that come with making such a future a reality, it also depends on a similarly sound implementation strategy, concrete actions capable of making change a global permanent reality. Copiosis' unique implementation plan is causing people with competence in the field to say that we have one of the best in class solutions for making this future that I think we all want a reality. So let's take a look at why that's the case. In this presentation, I'm going to define what fundamental change is so that we're all on the same page, because I think some of us in the RBE ecosystem may have a different idea of what fundamental change looks like. So we have a specific definition of what that is. And so I'm going to define that first. And then I'm going to lay out the 7 implementation barriers that, in my opinion, invalidate most new future ideas only because they don't recognize that these are problems, and therefore they don't really directly address them. And then after that, you'll have the context within which to understand our implementation plan, which is what I'll talk about next. And then after that, I'll end with just a few words about my personal position and my relationship with Copiosis, given kind of the feedback that I recently had on the Copiosis Facebook page. So what is fundamental change? Fundamental change from our perspective is a condition of existence where human beings are living in a highly technological, but also a deeply spiritual global civilization, where every human being is free to express themselves in ways that maximize his or her self-actualization on a planet that enjoys an abundant, regenerated, and self-sustaining environment. Fundamental change necessitates eliminating debt-based monetary systems, the personal and organizational debt such systems create, earning a living as a means of human motivation, and the infrastructures which perpetuate all those things. I believe that only when these conditions are met can we say we've succeeded in creating fundamental change. Now, I know some RBE folks may not agree with that definition, but that's the definition we're using at Copiosis as we move forward with our implementation. So now that I've defined fundamental change, let's start with something some often misunderstand, and that is the word copiosis itself and where it comes from. Some people think that copiosis sounds like a disease. We've actually had a lot of comments about that, but the word actually comes from Latin and means abundance, prosperity, fully formed, and rich. And so it's a word I deliberately chose from Latin as a brand name because it perfectly describes what the innovation is, how it works, and what it promises. So Copiosis is actually 2 different things, never been seen before. It is the innovation itself and the implementation organization making Copiosis a reality. So very briefly, Copiosis is a socioeconomic innovation combined with an implementation strategy and supporting elements which themselves comprise multiple strategic elements and principles, all working recursively in a way that transforms individuals, how they think, relate to, and interact with each other and their environment, while creating room to end humanity's reliance on debt-based monetary instruments, capitalist markets, and government bureaucracies to manage resource allocation. Got a little bit of feedback there. Copiosis, the innovation, relies on several tried and true principles for its success, including both principles based in what people call science or science-based approaches, and principles based on what some people call pseudoscience and superstition. And this is where the controversy, I think, occurs between some RBE enthusiasts and Copiosis. Nevertheless, all these principles are woven into both the innovation and the implementation organization, as well as our implementation activities. For example, The innovation itself is an algorithmic system of multi-layered virtuous cycles working together interconnectedly to create this fundamental change that we want to see at Copiosis. The word algorithmic comes from a science-based model called the viable systems model, which is an operational research model created by cybernetician Stafford Beer when he observed organisms in their environment and wanted to understand how those organisms are able to thrive. The viable systems model is a major component of our framework through which Copiosis, the organization, sees its work. So the VSM framework is balanced by a larger, more enduring framework, which is available to anyone, which originates from all that is. It allows us to understand how all that is transforms itself into people, events, and other physical phenomenon. And this larger, more enduring framework gives us a tremendous advantage over other innovations in terms of making our innovation a reality. Now, I realize what I just shared probably raises a lot more questions than it answers. Unfortunately, fully understanding Copiosis can't really happen in a 30-minute presentation. So hopefully in the Q&A, we'll be able to have a robust back and forth, and you'll get some more understanding through answers that I provide to any questions you have. At this point, I'll continue by explaining how Copiosis works in more detail than you saw in the 3-minute presentation that started my presentation. So in Copiosis, producers and products and services are classified into 2 broad categories: necessities and luxuries. There's a 3rd category that are called capital goods, but we're not going to talk about that category because it's beyond the scope of this conversation. We're just trying to get a general understanding of how Copiosis works. So only those who accumulate net benefit rewards can consume luxuries in Copiosis. Net benefit rewards is a reward mechanism we've created which functions alongside the luxuries. Together, they provide an extrinsic motivation for human productivity. Copiosis measures results from human actions and rewards people for the beneficial actions, which are defined as actions that produce a net benefit. So now we have to define what a net benefit is. So a net benefit is a new term that we've defined as all the negative results of a human being's actions quantified, then subtracted from a quantified tally of all the positive results of that same action. If the results of that calculation is positive, the human actor has created net benefit and receives a reward. If the result is 0 or negative, that human being receives no reward or may go into an NBR deficit. NBR is the net benefit reward that people get, and it is the result that shows up when you perform the calculation. Whoops, I went back. I think I went a little bit too far. Just 1 second. There we go. So, all human activity creates a measurable result. Results can be traced back to decisions people make and the actions they take from those decisions. Net benefit, therefore, is not a moral judgment of decisions, behaviors, or outcomes. All it is a reward people get according to the net benefit of their actions. So the prime question is, did the action a human being takes make humanity and the planet better off or worse off in net terms? That's all the calculation measures. Now, necessities, so I spoke a bit about luxuries and I spoke about net benefit. Now let's talk about necessities. Necessities are specifically defined as products and services falling into these 5 categories: food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare. Necessities are provided to everybody on the planet at no cost. Now, there's a major distinction that people have a problem with between no cost and free. No cost is not the same as free. No cost necessities are not handouts, and they don't function like that, nor do they function like entitlements. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A. We really need to understand the difference between free and no cost. So people who make both necessities and luxuries receive NBR for their beneficial actions. Everyone in Copiosis is richer than they are today. I think that's easy to understand, because if you acknowledge that the basic necessities as I described them, if they're provided to everyone at no cost, then there's this baseline that everyone exists at that allows them to live a more luxurious life than they do today, because they're not having to pay for any of the things that they're getting at no cost. So even if we had money still in the future and everything was being provided at no cost to people, they would have more money available to buy other things, so they would be richer than they are today. That should pretty much be a logical conclusion that everyone on the meeting can make. So anyone whose actions benefit others of the planet, or both, is rewarded NBR. The larger the net benefit produced by their actions compared to the resources consumed, the more reward that person gets. So, getting rich in Copiosis is a simple matter of benefiting lots of other people, or large portions of the planet, or both, while at the same time minimizing one's resource consumption and or the negative outcomes that might result from one's actions. So in Copiosis, there's an infinite number of producers. Resource allocation then is determined through a philosophy called Stigmergy, which you can look up on the internet. There's an article that describes it in great detail. It's very, very fascinating. So Stigmergy and an individual desire for NBR, which allows people to get luxuries, function as alongside the human virtue greed. So I know a lot of people in our ecosystem that's trying to eliminate capitalism believe that greed is one of the problems of our society today. But we at Copiosis don't see greed as a problem. We see it as a virtue. We just don't have a system that harnesses greed in a way that produces the outcomes we want. So what Copiosis does is it harnesses this thing called greed and turns it into the virtue that it is. So if you understand Copiosis based on what I've shared so far, a person can't become rich in Copiosis while at the same time destroying the planet or other people. As I said, necessities are provided to all at no cost. Necessity producers receive their NBR, their necessities at no cost also, while being rewarded for the net benefit their necessity production creates. So necessity production is easily accomplished because nearly everyone wants luxuries in our society, and getting them is not generally possible without creating net benefit. So necessities producers create a lot of net benefit by producing the necessities that people consume, so they're being rewarded NBR, which allows them to consume the luxuries that they want. So that said, everyone is free to do whatever they want in Copiosis. But if they want to enjoy the fabulous necessities that the fabulous luxuries that Copiosis generates, then they have to do things that create net benefit. Now, there are a lot of subtle things about Copiosis that we don't have time to get into, but I'm sure in the question and answer section, we'll start to touch on those, and you'll get a sense of some of those subtle elements that go along with what I've described that make this whole system work in the way that it does. So Copiosis and its implementation plan are based on principles proven throughout human history. They also incorporate many highly intuitive yet new approaches unheard of before. Copiosis opposes no one. It vilifies nobody. It requires no wealth transfers to make it happen. It offers compelling incentives to the super rich. And I know this is one of the challenges that some people in the RBE deal with is the fact that we have ultra rich people, and how are they going to move along with a system or an idea that may penalize them? Well, Copiosis doesn't offer anything that penalizes the super rich. In fact, it offers many benefits to the super rich, which allows the super rich, in theory anyway, to go along with the innovation. Given all of this, it's no wonder that some people who have competence in the field are saying that Copiosis has the best chance of succeeding compared to other alternatives. Now, I personally say it's working today because our implementation plan is producing exactly the results we expect at this time. And we expect this trend to continue as we move forward. For these reasons and more, people are saying that Copiosis is the best in class compared to other alternatives, including the RBE transition plans or transition speculations being made. They also say this because it is the only system that addresses the 7 critical barriers standing between us and the future I think we collectively want. And it also transforms those barriers into bridges to the future we all want, as I'll describe in just a minute. So Copiosis is 100% focused on implementation. We want to implement a transition that makes this real fundamental change that we believe is possible a reality. So I now want to talk about the 7 barriers that I've touched on a couple of times in the presentation. I call these 7 barriers the 7 deadly sins. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but the word sin came from a word in archery before the pre-Christian era. And all the word meant before it got the biblical baggage that it now has, all the word meant was to miss the mark. I don't hear these 7 issues adequately addressed in any of the alternative systems that I'm aware of. And if we don't have practical solutions to these barriers, transitioning to a new future is really a non-starter, because in many ways, many human beings and their egoic identities are intricately tied to one or all of these barriers. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to explain each of these. I tried to explain them when I was rehearsing the presentation, but it goes too long. So I'm going to skip over them, and we can talk about them more in the question and answer section. But suffice it to say that our innovation effectively deals with every one of these deadly sins in a relatively straightforward and easy manner. So now let me spend the rest of my time talking about our implementation strategy. What is our plan? And how does it work? Well, our plan is composed of several phases, which, much like our innovation technology, act recursively to make Copiosis a reality. Like every other new thing, our first phase is about building awareness. I know you guys are probably yawning because everyone's trying to build awareness of their new idea. Our key tools in building awareness are public relations, so general corporate public relations type activities, using social media, and strategies taken from political election campaigns and real-world demonstration projects through which we show people how Copiosis can work. Our demonstration projects also generate use case data that help us refine the innovation. 4 different kinds of demonstration projects are planned in the early phase. 2 of these demonstration versions have been used already, one in Portland, Oregon, and one in Northern California. Another one is currently underway in Greece, and the 4th type is still in development. So a whistle stop tour is it's a road show. I don't know if they do these in Europe, but in the United States, when candidates are running for election, they do these whistle stop tours. And what they do is they get a big bus and they drive around city by city throughout the country, talking to people in their hometown about the issues that they care about and how the politician is going to solve the issues. In the same way, our whistle stop tour is going to take that model. So we're planning to do a tour of the United States where we're going to go city by city and talk about how Copiosis is going to solve the problems that people are facing in their communities, locality by locality. We're going to do the same thing in the United Kingdom. And while we're doing that, we're also going to be talking with them about the vision of Copiosis, which is a society where everybody is living debt-free, with necessities provided to all at no costs, and everybody enjoying an extremely prosperous global society wherein no one has to earn a living and everyone is free to pursue their passions in a regenerated, healthy global environment. So basically in this phase, what we're doing is we're demonstrating through social media, through public relations, and through our demonstration projects, how we confront individuals and their psychosocial conditioning and indoctrination tropes, which cause people to act in ways counter to their own self-interest, such as electing politicians whose own self-interest often runs counter to the self-interest of those they supposedly represent. So, as I said, each phase is overlapping. As in nature, where there are no definite boundaries distinguishing where one object or event ends and another begins, so too our implementation plan phases actually form a seamless web of activity that kind of blends together. So it's hard to tell when one phase begins and one phase ends. That being said, in phase 2, we strive to dramatically ramp up our understanding both of within our global citizenry and on our team. I mentioned understanding on our team because everybody on our team, including myself, is constantly undergoing our own human revolution or our own refinement and growth. So we're fundamentally changing as individuals, just as we're trying to implement fundamental change at the societal level. And the approaches we're using in this phase also generate massive user community feedback that we're using actually to improve the innovation and our approach. For example, when the video that you saw at the beginning of this presentation came out, it came out last summer, some of the people who saw that video immediately thought that Copiosis was just another version of socialism or communism. And since so many people had that opinion, in our next video, which probably is going to come out next month, we changed our tagline to directly and accurately define what Copiosis is, rather than letting others define it based on their knee-jerk reaction and their indoctrination tropes. So our new tagline is Copiosis, a no-risk, no-tax, no-cost, free market, moneyless economy where everybody wins and nobody loses. So as you can see in this example, what we're doing is we're listening to the feedback we get from our implementation strategy and then changing our strategy to address those feedback so that we can improve as we move forward. This is a perfect example of how we're using the viable systems model to monitor, interact with, and adapt to our environment so that we succeed as an implementation organization. A quick mention of the Obama-Sanders effect mentioned here, because I think most of you do not live in the United States, so it bears some explanation. The Obama-Sanders effect is a phenomenon where tens of thousands or maybe millions of people gave $5 to $10 or $2 to $3 a month to the Obama campaign and the Bernie Sanders campaign in order for them to pursue their electoral ambitions. We expect the same phenomena to happen with Copiosis, and here's why. There's a rhythm that exists in nature wherein these things called black swans, I don't know if you've heard that term, or other seemingly unexpected and rare events can be expected and are not actually rare at all. These rhythms are all around us, and human beings usually can have access to perceiving those rhythms, but we usually don't broaden our perspective widely enough to include perceiving them. Yet, with effort, it is possible to do so, and we're doing so at Copiosis. As a result of tuning ourselves to this rhythm, we can expect that tuning to drive more ambitious sounding outcomes outlined in our implementation plan, such as replicating the Obama-Sanders effect for Copiosis and thereby generating tens of millions of dollars a year to fund our activities. The Obama and Sanders campaigns are evidence of just one example of this rhythm, wherein millions of people provide tens of millions of dollars to breathe life into ideas whose times have come. And we believe this whole effort that all of us are working to create, this new future, is an idea whose time has come. And people are just waiting to pour tens of millions of dollars into the idea. They're just waiting for the right idea, or at least the idea they think is the right idea. And so we believe we've tuned ourselves to this rhythm. And therefore, as more people become aware of Copiosis, more people are going to want to support Copiosis with the funding that's going to make our implementation plan possible. Okay, our third phase takes its cues from the very influential US Tea Party patriots. Now, I don't know if you guys, because you're in the UK, I don't know if you're aware of the Tea Party movement in the United States, but the Tea Party movement was the far-right movement that was essentially the precursor to Trump's election. The Tea Party movement was heralded by Time magazine in the United States as one of the most influential movements in US history. It seemed like a grassroots movement, but it was actually funded by very large alt-right organizational interests. We are planning to position ourselves as the next Tea Party movement, not because we're alt-right, we're actually, well, I personally am alt-left, but some other people in our organization are not alt-left. So I don't want to say we're all left-leaning. Some of us are right-leaning. But nevertheless, we expect to position ourselves to be as influential as the Tea Party movement was in the United States. So by this phase that we're talking about now, phase 3, we have amassed a significant community chest of funding, and we are using that funding to place what we call one-issue candidates in elected offices, just like the Tea Party movement did. By the way, again, if you live in the United States, you've already seen this approach work this year. In response to an increasing desire for something different from Trumpism, in election campaigns last week, 8 transgender candidates won elections in the United States. Now that should be something that should knock your socks off, because here we are in the most right-leaning government of the United States, totally opposed to transgender people, totally opposed to the LGBT community, and 8 candidates who are transgender won all across our country. It's really remarkable. So we're intending to produce exactly the same results, capitalizing on social dissatisfaction with how things are worldwide, and placing elected officials who agree with our platform into elected office, just like the transgender community has placed transgender elected officials into political offices. Now, given the worldwide nature of the issues that all of us as a community are trying to solve, I believe there is more momentum behind wanting to see the problems we all believe want to be solved than there are people who are interested in making sure transgender people get their transgender rights. So the potential of having elected officials who support what we want to see happen, getting those people into elected office, in my opinion, should be easier than getting transgender people in elected office. And we've seen transgender people get elected. So it seems natural or logical that getting people who are interested in what we want to see happen into elected offices should be easier, because there's just more people wanting to see this kind of thing happen. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. Okay. So this political phase, this phase 3, is the most significant and longest running phase, which culminates with the legalization of copiosis in at least one industrialized country. And this is the most important milestone of our implementation plan. Once one country adopts copiosis as its economic system, we begin the slippery slope of all the other countries they must follow suit, because it is not possible to compete with a nation that has gone copiosis, because its ability to produce products and services at next to zero cost will cause other countries that are bound by debt and debt-based economic systems to not be able to compete. What's more, the copiosis nation's citizenry will be enjoying a level of prosperity that is impossible for other countries to replicate when they're basing their economy on debt-based monetary instruments. So, any one industrialized country or many countries can signify this first mover event. So long as at least one industrialized country adopts copiosis, the transition to a copiosis economy is assured. Which brings me to the pre-transition, near-term pre-transition, transition, and near-term post-transition phases. In these phases, we implement debt elimination and asset value transfers into NBR, which begins to solve the 7 deadly sins that I talked about before. We formalize the payer group through the Payer Institute, which is the institute through which payer organization volunteers are trained. We modify national and international infrastructure to monitor resources and provide signals to producers via the payer group, while at the same time resolving inevitable challenges that we fail to foresee. So the example I use here is the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare in the United States. When that was first implemented, there were all kinds of problems early on. Nobody foresaw that those problems were going to exist, so they had to clean up the mess as the implementation occurred. And the same thing's going to occur with something as significant as what we're talking about as in this community. So second to the last slide, I just want to say, or actually not quite second to last slide, sorry. Through all of these implementation phases, all that plays a significant role. And this is really important and something that distinguishes Copiosis from pretty much, let me think, all but one other implementation to a new future, in my opinion, ignores this component. And that is the role that all that plays in creating the seeming coincidences that support the transition. There is already a massive stream of positive momentum energy behind Copiosis and our movement collectively. All of the work that we're all doing, there's massive momentum energy behind it, propelling it forward in time and space. And to the degree that, frankly, I'm just going to be frank, to the degree that people do not believe that all that is playing this role, you are shooting your implementation plans in the foot. Because if you're not on the side of all that is, then you're actually operating against your intention. And this is why we at Copiosis include a huge heaping of acknowledgement to all that is making all of the things we're doing possible. So by the pre-transition phase of our model, the momentum is so great, it's just impossible for any opposition to succeed. In fact, the more opposition that occurs, the more that opposition fuels greater adoption. And we've seen that with the Trump movement. So as Trumpism has become more prevalent, it has galvanized more opposition to their ideas. And that's why we have seen these transgender people get elected, is because people are fed up with Trumpism. And the more Trumpism tries to exert itself, the more people respond, no, that's not going to happen. And so we see the change that we actually think is not going to happen, actually happen. The same thing, I believe, is going to happen with Copiosis. Okay, second to the last slide. I just want to talk real briefly about myself. And I'm talking about myself here because recently on the Copiosis page and in the social group, there's been some conflict about me as an individual and the things that I say in those two venues. So Copiosis has never been, nor will it ever be, about Perry Gruber. That's me. Right now, there are a few people focusing their time and energy directly making Copiosis a reality. There's a lot of people that are doing it indirectly. And when I say that, I'm referencing that slide before about all that is. One of the people that are doing this is that very wealthy entrepreneur in Sweden who is hosting the Global Challenges Prize and offering the $5 million prize to ideas that can meet his criteria. That person doesn't know about Copiosis, but because of what he's doing, he's actually supporting what we're trying to do. So there are a lot of people that are supporting Copiosis, but my small team are the only ones that are directly working on it. As a result, I'm an important part of the implementation because I'm holding the pure vision of what Copiosis is and can be. Now, it's natural that in these early phases that some people are going to focus on me as Copiosis, but I am not Copiosis. Copiosis stands on its own. And I just want you to know that I am in no way attaching my ego or my identity with Copiosis. I have multiple organizations that I'm founding and I'm running. So while some may think Copiosis is some ego-centered effort of mine, or that I'm duping humanity, or running some kind of conspiracy or scam to make money, or that I'm in league with, I've heard that I'm in league with the status quo or the 1% and I'm just trying to enslave the rest of humanity. None of that is the case. None of it is the case. I also want to say a few things about my personal wealth. I know that all that is bountifully flows its energies towards those people who live their calling. That bountiful energy includes and is manifested as financial wealth and abundance, to the degree that the person in question does not resist that flow. So I fully expect Copiosis, as well as my other organizations, to generate enormous wealth for me and my family because of this. Because I am tapping into what I was called to do on this planet. And in my opinion, all that is rewards those who do not ignore what they were called to do in this world. All the organizations I've created are designed specifically to improve humanity or the world in some way. Now, I know that there are some people, probably some people on this call, who have a problem with wealth. I don't think that people who have a problem with wealth understand how all that is functions, particularly with regard to wealth creation. So, the people who have a problem with wealth harbor negative views about wealth and the wealthy people in general. And I know this because I was once one of those people. I was once one of those people who hated wealthy people. So perhaps some of you have negative opinions about wealth and wealthy people. If so, I don't expect you to understand my position on this matter. And while I don't expect you to understand my position on this matter, I don't make any apologies about the wealth that's going to come to Copiosis, to me, to my family, or to the other people in the other organizations that I'm running. For again, I believe that all that is boundless abundance. And those who are aligned to that abundance naturally experience that abundance in all ways, including financial wealth. All right, so if you have a modicum of wealth and are interested in taking action to assist our work, please consider becoming a patron. Thanks for listening and for watching, and let's move on to the question and answers.
Okay, thank you, Perry. We're all poor here, so all got problems with wealth. Okay. Well, thank you for your very detailed explanation. And this is the part of the meetings that we usually have around for questions and comments and things like that. I usually take notes, and I did with yours as well. And I've got loads of things to talk about. But before, well, I don't want to start out, so maybe somebody else wants to start out, or shall I just do it? Has anyone? Yeah, Stephanie.
Do forgive me, I have loads of questions, so I'll just ask 2 or 3. I'll ask them in at the same time, so you can answer later. So my first question is, I didn't catch the detail. Do we have money in the Copiosis? Like, what's the economic system it's like in this society? The second question, in Copiosis society, do we have a law? Do we have a police like today? So yeah, I'll just keep these 2 questions.
Okay, that's easier to remember. So in Copiosis, there is no money. So you guys are RBE enthusiasts, so you know that that there's a tenet of the RBE theory that any sort of credit or reward is antithetical to the RBE movement, right? Okay. I believe that in order to get to the RBE, you have to have some sort of intermediary step, because people are so used to receiving something in return for their effort. And so what we do is we replace money, which is a medium of exchange, we replace that with MBR. So MBR is not money, because you do, if I do something for you and you consume the thing that I've done for you, the MBR that I receive for the net benefit created by my action doesn't come from your pocket. It comes from the payer organization. Okay, and then if you want to consume a luxury, because you have to use MBR to get the luxury, let's say you're consuming a luxury that has a gateway of 50 MBR. When you give up that 50 MBR, the MBR does not go to the owner of the luxury. It just disappears. So there is no monetary exchange in Copiosis like there is in a money system. In a money system, if you want to consume my luxury, you give me some of your dollars and I give you my luxury. There's an exchange. In Copiosis, there is no exchange. You consume my luxury, and when you consume my luxury, the payer organization rewards me for the benefit that I produced by providing you a luxury that has made your life better off. So there's no two-way exchange as in a monetary system.
Right. What about
Does that
law?
make sense?
Do we have a law?
Yeah. Yeah. So the justice system in Copiosis is transformed in a way that creates laws that are net beneficial. So, for example, right now in the United States, we have, I think it's 2 or 3 million Black people in prison. And many of those Black people are in prison because of minor drug offenses. It's very expensive to put somebody in jail. It uses an enormous amount of resources. And it's proven that a person coming out of jail is more likely to recommit an act that put him in jail than he is to not. So is the net benefit of putting someone in jail positive or negative relative to the resources consumed? What do you think, just generally off the top of your head? It's negative. It's negative. And so the justice system, our system of laws, has to be organized in a way that they produce net benefit, not negative net benefit. So what does that mean? It means justice system workers have to look at reinventing the justice system so it operates on a net beneficial basis. Otherwise, the people working in the justice system will not be rewarded NBR, and they will not be able to consume luxuries as a result. And everyone wants to consume luxuries, and so they're going to do the thing that produces the net benefit. Did that answer your question, Hiri?
Yep.
Yeah. So there are laws, they're just reinvented so that the laws produce net benefit, not the net negative benefit that's created today.
Yeah, I think it's important also what you say, you know, to get from here to there. That's what we're talking about. And I certainly recognize, what you're saying about, you know, people now being so indoctrinated with certain ways of life, certain ways of thinking and living, that, you know, if everything was just taken away, and basically, that might not be so realistic to think, poof, we can just wave a wand. And so, yeah, challenging, but I can see what you're talking about, definitely. Anyone else have any questions before I go on with my 6 pages of notes?
Can I just add one thing to what you just said, Charlotte?
Yeah.
So in the long-term implementation, we have a state, and this might excite the people on the call. In the long-term implementation of Copiosis, we have a state where the majority of the people living on the planet are not familiar with capitalism as a reality. They may be familiar with it from history, but they haven't had personal experience with it because they were born into Copiosis. And then the majority of people who have had that experience are dead. And so at that point, because you don't have an experiential reference to capitalism, people do not have that indoctrination. And at that point, you can do away with the reward system altogether, because then people have been indoctrinated into doing things that benefit people and the planet, just like they want, just for the good of it, just because it makes them feel good, and because of the results it produces. And at that point, it's much easier to move to the RBE than it is to do it from today.
Yeah, I got you there. Yuri says he's only got 1 page of notes, so we'll let him go next.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought Yuri was Jing's name. Sorry, Jing. I called you by the wrong name. Sorry about that.
Her name is Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie. Sorry. I'm reading the names wrong. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. All right, Yuri, lay it on me.
All right. So let me see, because I have some priority questions here, let's say. Well, I'll share an impression first to get that out of the way. So I'm having the impression that this seems to take a lot from the Venus Project's proposal of the resource-based economy, but modified, highly modified in many fundamental levels. So I'm giving this impression. I think it's relevant because there seems to be a lack of understanding of some fundamentals, because some of the things that were said were actually, that the only project to propose one thing or the other was this one, but actually it's already present in one of the phases of the Venus Project, or one of the more in-depth books or something like that. So I had the impression that there was some depth missing there, but that's not really my question. So that's just to get the impression that I felt like there's some learning to be had in deeper level. So, but basically, I saw that it seems like, I think you mentioned that there is law in the presentation, and man-made law. So maybe you answered that question. Maybe you want to explore a little bit more what exactly is proposed, since coming from a resource-based economy and a scientific perspective, only natural laws really seem to persist, because human-made laws are always broken here and there when necessary, when it's beneficial. So how do you prevent that, laws being broken if you do have laws? Or if you already answered that, I'm more interested in the trade thing, because the Venus Project proposes, and I realize that the trade is really the problem. The monetary system is a layer on top of that, because it facilitates trade, but trade fundamentally can't be fair, because you can't grow wealth and be fair in a trade system unless you don't want to grow wealth, or you produce every single thing that you consume. Because if you're trading with people, you can't grow wealth without charging more than the product costs you to produce it. So if we still have trade in that system, in considering from the assumption that the trade is a problem, how do you, considering that you still have trade in this different, that net benefit system, we still have, if we have trade, we have, again, you said you can get rich, so we have rich people, and if we do have rich people, we have poor people. And so in that trade system, we'll still have social stratification, right? I think my question is really growing. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
If anything is not clear, but yeah, that's basically the trade thing, apart from the law thing.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, it's very clear, Yuri. Thank you. First, regarding your impression, you're absolutely right. We at Copiosis believe that our focus needs to be on our innovation. And so we don't know a lot about other people's innovations. I did not know anything about the Venus Project when I created the transition plan for Copiosis. But, I mean, we're all trying to transition to the same thing. So it's not surprising that the Venus Project's transition plan is going to, in some ways, seem similar to ours. because we're all trying to go in the same direction. And if we're going to go in that direction, there's only a few prescribed ways that we're going to get there, I think. So that's why it probably seems familiar. And you're right. I don't have the depth in the Venus Project, and I never will, because I'm focused on Copiosis. So there are definitely going to be holes in my understanding of that. All right. Relative to laws, so my personal belief is laws are unnecessary. The only reason why we have laws is because we have a system that creates a circumstance where people are disconnected from the oneness that underlies all of our relationships. So when people get disconnected from that, they see separation, and then when they see separation, in their pain, they lash out and commit things that they wouldn't otherwise commit. One of the things they commit is they put in place a system that creates wealth disparity, that creates the need to earn a living, that creates debt, that oppresses marginalized peoples. All of these acts are the result of a disconnection, a lack of understanding of the oneness that exists between all of us. So in the context of that disconnection, the solution that has been proposed is lawmaking. And as you have said, there are times when laws are obeyed, and there's times when they're not. And when it's not convenient to obey the law, we're not going to obey them. And to be honest with you, it's not just the 1% that does that. We do it too. Like when I don't know if you drive or not in your country, but when I drive, if I can get away with it, I'm not going to drive the speed limit, right? Or if I'm crossing the street, I'm not going to wait for the light to turn green to cross the street. So we all we all are guilty of perpetuating these kinds of behaviors relative to laws. All right. Unfortunately, like Charlotte said, the transition occurs in time and space. And so it's not possible, in my opinion, to jump from where we are today to a system of no laws, because you have people still immersed in law behavior, law-abiding and law-breaking behavior, and people who are still disconnected from the oneness of all that is. And so you need some way to rein those people in. And that's why we still need laws. Okay, so I hope that addressed the law comment. Let's talk about the trade comment, because this one is really important. Not that the others weren't, but this one's really important. In my opinion, the way that all that is expressed through humanity is through creativity. And creativity shared exists in a state of trade. I trade my artistic expression with the people around me, and they share or trade their artistic expression in return. And that artistic expression can look all different kind of ways. It could look the way it could look like the kind of videos that Steve Saylor creates. It could look like this meeting that Charlotte is presiding over. Creativity looks all kinds of ways, and we experience the joy of creativity in the exchange of the creativity. So that includes productive creativity, the creation of goods and services that create the wealth or the prosperity, not wealth, prosperity, which is different than wealth. So the question then is it possible to have trade, which is the exchange of creativity? Is it possible to have trade in an environment where it doesn't also create inequality? And when I use the word inequality, I mean power imbalance, not prosperity imbalance. Because let's be honest, some people are going to be, for all kinds of reasons, are going to be inspired or motivated to do more than other people. And some people's inspiration, whether you like it or not, are going to have greater benefits to other people than other people, until the people who aren't very good at expressing their creativity get better. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Can I add just one question in case? But is it maleficial? Is it bad if people that do less have are rewarded less? Is there any negative impact on doing that?
Could you ask that again?
I'm not sure if it was you were going to say, but does that have any? Is it negative? Is there any negative impact to giving people that contribute less the same opportunities and same access to resources than people that contribute more?
Got it. Very good question. So, and this is why, in my opinion, Copiosis is so pretty amazing. Because, so let's say I'm a crappy artist. I produce art and nobody consumes it because it's shitty. And then Steve Saylor, on the other hand, uses these masterpieces that are being consumed by millions of people around the planet. So Steve is being rewarded more MBR because more people are benefiting from his artistic expression. I'm not getting as much MBR because not as many people are consuming my artistic expression, and so not as many people are benefiting. But in Copiosis, because the necessities are provided to everyone at no cost, I have the same opportunity that Steve has to up my skills. Education is free. Artistic, what's it called? Apprenticeship. It's not free. It's at no cost. Artistic apprenticeship comes at no cost. I can develop myself in the context of Copiosis because the necessities that are provided allow a framework for me to do that without having to earn a living. So in some period of time, assuming that I apply myself, I might be able to get as good as Steve Saylor. I may not produce the same thing he produced. He's saying, no, you're not. I may not be able to produce the same thing that he produces at the same quality, but I'm not Steve Saylor. I have my own gifts and my own qualities that I came into the world to express. So the necessities provide the same baseline for everybody to tap into the innate talents and skills that each person has. And each person has a different set of skills and talents. And because the necessities are provided at no cost, everyone has the equal opportunity to spend time developing those things. And when they do that, you guys, oh my God, imagine what society would be like if everyone was tapping into their own talents and skills instead of earning a living and express those into the world to other people. So in that context, does it matter that I'm being rewarded less NBR right this minute than Steve is? No, because in the future, once I figure out who I am as a person and am expressing myself from that place, there's no reason why that expression cannot create the same level or more outcome benefit that Steve is producing. And I say that because all that is rewards us all tremendously when we live from the skills and talents that we brought into the world with us. That's what we're creating. So in that context, does wealth disparity matter? And in my mind, the answer is no. Because if you as an individual are applying yourself to figure out who you are and live from your skills and talents, the wealth disparity that exists in your life compared to others can be closed simply by developing yourself and expressing that development into the world. And because wealth in Copiosis is separated from power, because wealth expressed as NBR accumulation is non-transferable. You cannot use it to reward somebody to do something. The only place that NBR comes from is the payer organization, and the only way NBR comes out of the payer organization is if somebody does something that produces a benefit. So you can't use your NBR to pay someone to create a law that's going to screw some other group of people. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question about trade?
Yes, thanks.
Great.
Hi, Erica. Nice that you could join us.
Hello, thanks.
Hi. Okay, Perry, I've got a question from Nicholas, and I'll just read it out to you. He says, because he had to leave, he said, how will technology be taken into consideration with this net balance reward system. A person could teach one person maths in real life and have a one-time impact. If a person teaches maths on YouTube, they can have 1,000 time impact. Will they be rewarded 1 or 1,000 when technology is used to amplify this impact? If it is the 1,000 case, what will happen with the people who create automation and replace the need for human intervention? How will people gain net balance rewards once machines override their impact? And I must add, this closely resembles something that came up in my mind while listening, because you talk frequently about people creating necessities, and within 10 or 15 years, that's not going to be necessary. Nicholas, he did a presentation a few weeks ago about the exponential growth of technology, and we're not gonna have to do that stuff. So that's basically the background of this question. So I'm looking forward to your answer on this as well.
Yeah, it's very, I get goosebumps when I think about this because it's so exciting. When I say, I'm surprised no one had an objection to my statement that the producers are infinite. And I say that because,
how do you
yes.
know nobody had an objection? We just kept ourselves muted until you were finished.
Good point.
I've been writing this stuff down.
Touche. Okay. So yeah, it's like there is a point where, let me start over. One of the goals of Copiosis is to free people from having to do any labor regarding manufacturing. So we fully embrace technology. The other goal is to free people, everybody, so that they all are focused on self-actualization. Now, the right will say, the right in the US, I think it's the right in UK too, they will say, well, so what you're saying is everyone's going to become an artist or a poet or a dancer. And the answer is yes, because ultimately the goal of humanity is not to sit in a factory and make stuff. It's to get out and to express ourselves from the innate origins of where we come from. And so we embrace fully technology to the point that it becomes, I think I even said that in what the definition of fundamental change is, it's a highly technology-infused society. Now, Nick's question is really good. So what about the guy who what about Elon Musk, who has created the driverless semi-truck? He's unveiling that soon if he hasn't. And it displaces all the people who currently drive semi-trucks. Does he get rewarded NBR? Well, yes, he gets rewarded NBR because now the millions of truckers no longer, do you realize how unhealthy it is to sit behind the truck of the wheel of a semi-truck for 6 to 8 hours a day? It's no wonder those people are obese and they get thrombosis and all the other and they eat like crap. And so it's like to free those people so that they can figure out who they really are instead of being a freaking on-the-road trucker is a huge benefit to society. So, of course, Elon Musk is going to get a lot of NBR. Now, if Elon Musk becomes NBR rich, is that a problem for people who aren't? And the answer is no, because Elon Musk is expressing his innate desire to see a world that he envisioned, that he brought into the world when he was born. In the same way, every one of us has that same type of vision. It may not be the same vision that Elon Musk has, but we have a vision. And tapping into that vision and living from that is what will make you as rich, NBR rich, as Elon Musk. So if someone produces something or some number of things that create an environment where all necessities are made by machines, everybody who used to be making necessities is now freed to do the thing that they really came into the world to do. Because nobody really comes into the world to make necessities. If you really look at the planet, nature takes care of providing us with necessities. We just attach money to necessities, requiring people to earn a living so that we can make money off of people consuming necessities. But the reality is nature provides necessities. We don't have to have people working to make necessities. So the goal of Copiosis is a fully automated society, a galactic automated society, wherein people are living and expressing their innate visions that they came into the world to express. We free people from having to do crappy jobs like driving semi-trucks and working in canneries and slaughtering cows and all those other crappy jobs, sitting behind desks and working at a computer. No offense, Stephanie. Those kind of jobs, we're freeing people from doing those jobs. So here's the thing. Is there anyone on the call who, when you were 5 or 6 years old, said, when I grow up, I want to work behind a computer screen? Anyone who said that? Nobody wants to do those kinds of jobs.
Well, that's a bit of an unfair question, Perry, because when we were born, there weren't computers like this.
Good point.
And you just successfully insult all the programmers in the world. We are here because the programmer of the Zoom, you can't just they work behind screens, and they like what they're doing. They're programming. They like programming. So, you know what I'm saying?
So let's distinguish from working in a company where you're paid less than you're worth, because no employer is going to pay what you're worth. They're going to pay what they have to pay you to do the job you do. Whether you're a coder or an accountant or a lawyer, you're going to get paid what the least amount of money that the employer can pay you. And when you work for that person, what you're working for is the money you get. You're trading your life hours for that money. Meanwhile, the employer is using the time you're giving to create the wealth that he generates or she generates, to put his kids in private school, to drive around the ocean on a yacht, to fly in a Gulfstream 500, to go to all the galas at Sundance and Monaco and all those places. In other words, you're sitting behind a screen doing your coding that you love to do while building the dream of the person that you're working for. Now, if you came in...
Could I just interrupt here for a minute? Because sure. I think actually what Nicholas, one of the things that he was asking about, if I interpreted the question correctly, is how is net worth going to be calculated? He asked one time versus 1,000, and that's another question for me. You know, who's going to be calculating this? How is the calculation going to be kept track of? And I envision, like the Venus Project talks about the automation of these processes. So I assume also in your plan, in Copiosis plan, that, and I think it's the Zeitgeist program, they also have a plan for how it was more about what things cost. So that's by incorporating not only cost in terms of money, but in terms of human effort, in terms of environmental impact and stuff like this. So I think part of Nicholas's question refers to how are these NBTs, net, what is it?
Net benefit reward. Yeah,
net benefit rewards, NBRs, how are they going to be, first of all, how did they establish the basic unit, and how are these units going to be accumulated, and how are they going to be kept track of?
Okay, let's talk about that. We have an algorithm that accounts for all the inputs necessary to measure the net benefit of a given human action. That is the kernel of our technology. Much like the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movement, we believe that the methodology for measuring worth can be automated. In fact, I'm working with so there's a PhD computer scientist that is a member of the core team of Copiosis, and he and I are having a vibrant conversation about incorporating blockchain technology, our own algorithm, and not virtual reality, not augmented reality, but there's another form of computer reality. Anyway, we are embracing a bunch of technologies that will allow us to automate the measure of net benefit. The moment you talk about cost, you are introducing scarcity into the conversation, and nature is not based on scarcity. And so in our calculation, we're not looking at cost. I'm going to get to the 1,000 benefit in a minute. We're not looking at cost. We're looking at the net benefit of an action. So when you're looking at resource consumption, for example, we're not looking at the scarcity of the resource. We're looking at the effect of using the resource. So if you use so let's say you have a hardwood and it is endangered. Oh, let's look at rhino horns. So, people tear rhino horns off of rhinos for aphrodisiac reasons.
Like Donald Trump's son. Yes.
So what is the cost of a rhino horn? You can't put a cost on a rhino horn, but you can talk about the negative net benefit of tearing a horn off a rhinoceros. We know that the more diverse a natural environment is, the more healthy that environment is. So if you're killing a rhinoceros, especially if you're just killing it for the horn, that's not a very positive net benefit. So we don't measure cost, we measure the benefit or the detriment of the resource consumption. That's just one of, I think there's 8 variables in our algorithm. That's just one of them. And so we believe we have an algorithm that accounts for all of the variables necessary to make this calculation. Now, with regard to the one versus the...
Sorry, I'm interrupting you a lot.
That's okay.
About these 8 variables, are they open? Can everybody know what they are?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go into the social group and go into the documents, and there's a document that talks about the algorithm and how it works. There's even a YouTube video on our YouTube page where the payer organization for our demonstration project recorded the conversation that we held in order to reward NBR during the demonstration project. So you get a really good sense of how the algorithm is used. So if a person benefits one person, it's the same calculation as if a person benefits 1,000 people. The question is, what are the resources consumed? How many, I'm just going to run through the algorithm variables. What are the resources consumed, and how abundant are they? How many people are doing what this person has done? So how many producers doing the same thing are there? How many people are wanting the thing that the producer did? So in the case of Nick's question, it was math. How many people want math education? We quantify that in the variable. What is the objective benefit to providing math education? What is the subjective benefit of providing math education? What is the benefit relative to human resiliency for human beings to be educated in math? What is the social benefit of having math-educated human beings? What is the environmental benefit of having math-educated human beings? These are all the variables that go into making the calculation relative to a person teaching math. So as you can see, there's 8 variables, and only one of them deals with how many people are being benefited by the action. So if it's one person being benefited, that goes into the calculation with the other 8 variables. If it's 1,000 people, that goes into the calculation with the other 8 variables. So all the other variables being equal, although it won't be equal because, well, actually it might be. Yeah, that's interesting. So 1,000 people being trained over the internet are it could be argued that that's using less resources than the person who's teaching one person in a classroom somewhere on a piece of land. It could be argued. So these are kind of the conversations that have to happen inside the payer group. But my point is, generally speaking, all things being equal, if a producer is benefiting more people or larger amount of the planet than another person, then that producer is going to get more MBR than the person who's benefiting one person or smaller segment of the planet. Okay. That's generally how.
Yeah, thank you for that. I see it's 9:30 now, and I'm willing to go on for a while, but I don't want to keep on hogging all the conversation time. So, Nuno, Steve, Erica, Tony, would you like, any of you like to ask anything? Yeah, Steve.
You're on mute, Steve, I think.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks about the views of my videos. I wish it were millions of people that see them. It's more like thousands, a few thousand probably. So I don't know what my benefit is there. But yeah, I remember we talked about this in the past, quantifying, you know, the things that people do. That's going to be a little bit of the tough part, and what are the luxuries. Maybe you should give a few examples of the luxuries that people want or that you think they want, and then also, you know, you mentioned that things are provided but they're not really free. I didn't quite get the differentiation on that. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing both of those up. Those are really good questions. Okay. With regard to the luxuries, if you look at today and separate the things people spend money on that they need, so like their rent or mortgage, their healthcare, their education, all those necessities, if you separate those, everything else that they spend money on is a luxury. So it's their vacation, it's the movie that they go to, it's the food that is beyond their necessity food. So like, we all could get along health-wise with basic food. Like, I'm not gonna, it's not so prescriptive, but like a good piece of fruit, some vegetables, maybe some organic meat, maybe not meat, some nuts, some oils, those kind of things are what, and some water. Those kind of things are necessities. But caviar and sushi and foie gras and those kind of meals, those things are luxuries. So it's the food that you eat that you're eating more for the delectable nature and the ambiance more so than the nutritional value. So in the category of food, that's what a luxury would be. Okay. So what are luxuries? Luxuries are experiences. Luxuries are products and services, services included. So let's say, for example, I'm a masseuse. This came up recently, and I work in a healthcare office, and I'm giving massages for people who have been injured. That's a medical necessity. Now, let's say I work in a spa where people come and they get pickle therapy, and they get, I just made that up. They get to sit under these growth lamps that provide these chakra benefits, and in addition, they get to go listen to Ram Dass or that version of that person in the future. And so this is more of an experience, according to the producer, of a luxury experience massage. So the difference between a luxury and a necessity is determined by the person producing that thing. That's essentially the difference. Now, your other question was, what was it? Oh, free versus no cost. So this is going to be controversial. In Copiosis, all property is owned by people. It's not owned in the way that it is today, where they have a title and you restrict other people from using that property because it's yours. It's more like stewardship, where you are responsible for managing that piece of property, whatever it is, to the maximum net benefit possible, as determined by you as the property owner. So if I'm a necessity producer and I have produced, let's say, bread or medical care, let's say I'm a doctor and I'm producing health physicals. Because my physicals, my services are private, they're privately owned by me as a steward, I am not obligated, because everyone's free in Copiosis, no one is compelled to do anything, I'm not obligated to give an exam to anybody. I can do whatever I want with my service. Same thing with the farmer down the street who grows apples. His apples are his. He doesn't have to give his apples to anybody. Now, if he grows apples, or I have the ability to produce exams and I don't, and he doesn't give his apples to anyone, no benefit is being created. So the farmer and I are not receiving any net benefit reward. So it behooves us to give, as me, as a doctor, to give as many exams as I can. And it behooves the farmer to give out as many as apples as he can as necessities, because the more people that eat his apples and the more people that benefit from my exam, the more net benefit is being created. So even though I'm not being compelled by any law or any body to give necessities to everybody who comes in my door, I'm probably going to do that anyway, because I want to create net benefit, because that's how I get my net benefit reward that allows me to consume necessities. So can you see now how necessities are not free? You can't just go into the store and take a loaf of bread off the shelf. That's someone's private property. But you can take a loaf of bread off the shelf, go to the checkout and check it out, because when you check it out and eat it at your home, you're receiving a net benefit. And the person, all the people who produced that bread, who went into producing it, are receiving NBR as a result of benefiting you with that necessity. That's the difference.
Okay, thanks. Then anyone else? Tony, Nuno, did you have anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. Hiya, Perry. Nice to meet you. I sent you a message earlier on today. Yes, yeah, that was me.
Yes.
So, but we'll talk about that another time if that's okay. I've got a question with your NBR. If somebody is not able to do things, how would that affect them? How would they get their luxuries? But also, there is a second part to the question. If I have, for example, a lot of knowledge, for example, like you have the difference these days, wages-wise, between a lawyer and a laborer, yeah, how does that work within the MBR as well? Would everybody be entitled to the same, or would there be a difference regarding their level of education?
I'll tackle the second one first. The net benefit reward is a function of the results produced. So an attorney, for example, gets paid a lot today. A laborer, not so much, depending on what the labor is. In Copiosis, an attorney who produces poor outcomes in the legal system is not going to get any net benefit reward at all. So it doesn't matter what his education level was, it's what he produces with his education. Now the laborer, this is really interesting about Copiosis. Let's look at a woman who works in a nail manufacturing facility. And all she does is she pulls that lever on that nail machine that takes the coil of metal and makes nails. Let's say she produces 1,000 nails an hour. Those nails go all over the economy. So her production as a laborer is benefiting probably tens of millions of people, because the nails are going into houses, they're going into boats, they're going into well, not cars because they're nails, but they're going into applications that nails are used, right? So her labor is, as a laborer, is benefiting probably tens of millions of people. So her net benefit reward is going to be high because of the benefit of her output. So I think that answered your question about the differences, right? Between a laborer and professional person?
Would that create a difference between people, where some people can create a higher MBR than others?
Well, yes, because some people have made decisions to go in certain directions than other people have. And like I said, I don't know if you were on before, but I said there's this baseline of necessities that create an opportunity for anyone to up-level their skills to the degree that they can produce the outcomes that they came into the world to produce. I believe everyone can become MBR rich in Copiosis once they tap into that thing or things that they came into the world to do. Because that thing or things that they came into the world to do will, without a doubt, benefit millions of people. We all benefit tens of millions of people just by living on the planet. And so everyone can become MBR rich. We just, when we think about money, we're thinking in this really narrow channel of what is value, and missing the huge benefit that human beings, just by being human beings, benefit other people. Like raising your kids, taking the time to raise your kids, you know, that has so many repercussions across millions of people when you raise that kid in a way that that kid is an upstanding human being. That is worthy of reward, for goodness sake. But in our society, our economics, we don't pay those people anything for raising your kid. It's no wonder why people neglect.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me talk about the incapacitation, because that was something that was asked early on when we first launched Copiosis, and it's an important one. So NBR is non-transferable. So if you and I were NBR wealthy and there was a incapacitated person, we could not give our NBR to that person so that he could get luxuries. But what we could do is we could go out and obtain luxuries and give them to that person. We could also, if we produce luxuries ourselves, we could just make an allocation of luxuries available for people who can't generate MBR. But think about technology. A couple of things. One, think about technology and what it could potentially do for someone that we consider in today's time-space reality, that we consider in today's time-space reality as incapacitated or incapable. There is technology. First of all, our definition of incapable is malleable. We used to think that people with autism were close to brain dead, but it turns out that those people are very capable. As science has progressed, we've discovered larger capabilities among those populations. In the same way as technology, as our technologically based society increases in its technological know-how, I believe we will discover ways that empower people formerly thought of as incapacitated as capable. For example, it is possible for a person paralyzed from the neck down today to use a computer. Why can't that person use a computer to teach math to thousands of people around the planet? There's no reason why that person can't. Is that person then generating MBR? Yes, he is. Right?
Yes, kind of. I agree with you there. I'm only drawing back on my own experience because I used to be a carer for two guys who had cerebral palsy, and they were very much restricted. Their luxuries was, in kind of a sense, me taking them out on the weekend, and we would go down to the pub and I would treat them to a meal, and they could decide what they wanted. I mean, how would that work within Copiosis? Because obviously there are some people that are just not capable, and
Right.
they are quite reliant on others, like these two
Yes.
lads that I was looking after.
Yes.
And really, what I kind of hated about some of the things with the guys that I worked with, they had an income. It was a UK income. They had a disability living allowance, but it felt more like a handout. It was like that they could not appreciate that money themselves, that they generated it. Do you know what I mean on that? So how would that kind of work?
Yeah. So the people you were carrying received money from the government? Is that what you're describing?
Yes, they got a disability living allowance and they got a carer's allowance. So basically they couldn't look after themselves. But the thing is that they were kind of, they were switched on, but they couldn't use a computer. They had good memory. But they did feel like that they didn't deserve that money because they didn't do anything for it, but they couldn't do anything for it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because
they actually felt that way?
Pardon?
They actually felt that way? They felt they did not deserve it?
they felt as if it was a handout.
Got it. Okay. All right. First, the people like yourself who care for those people are rewarded far more in Copiosis than they are today, because that is a extremely valuable service. The fact that you're taking your time to take these people out is valuable and should be rewarded more than it is today. And when you consider the resources consumed to do that versus the benefit created, it's a net positive benefit, I think. Secondly, I'm going to answer all the points you made. Secondly, when you take someone out like that, necessities are provided at no cost to everybody. So if you go to a restaurant, the food that, if you go to a necessity restaurant or a restaurant that has both luxuries and necessities, the food that you get could be necessity food, or you could get luxury food. Now, because luxuries are privately owned, the owner of that restaurant could decide out of compassion to just give foie gras to I'm just using that as an example, a luxury food to the person that you brought into the restaurant without any cost to either of you. But more importantly, and this I'm not going to be able to substantiate with science because we're not there yet. But I know this to be true from all that is. A person who comes into the world with cerebral palsy is coming into the world to demonstrate a different perspective than the one that is commonly focused on in physical reality. Inside of that experience, even though our science cannot at this point identify it, there is an intelligence. And that intelligence can be expressed. We may or may not have the ability to provide the conduit through which that intelligence can be expressed right now. But that doesn't mean that we will not in the future find a means that allows that creativity, that intelligence, and that expression from being expressed. And when that happens, people who have cerebral palsy and other conditions that we call debilitating or incapacitating, we will have the ability to contribute to society. You just got to take me on faith on that.
Yes, yeah, I hear you loud and clear. The only thing is when you said about if, for example, the restaurant owner would be so kind and give them a luxury, it would still be a handout. You see, it still takes away a little bit of a choice from them.
So let's talk about the indoctrination trope called a handout.
Can I just intervene here with a thought? What I recognize in what you're saying, Perry, or what I think I recognize, any people that are physically or mentally disabled in any way provide us all with an opportunity. They provide us all with a gift. They provide us all with the possibility to be able to show compassion. They provide us all with the possibility to become better human beings by not just thinking about ourselves, but thinking about other people. And unfortunately, we normally don't see it like that. And even the people themselves, they don't see themselves like that. But this is how I understand what you're saying, Perry.
That is what I'm saying. And in addition to that, there is an innate intelligence and creativity inside of those people that cannot be tapped right now because we do not have the science that allows that expression to come out. But we will. And it's inevitable because they exist. And so it's like so back to what was your name? It says World Summit. Tony. Okay. So back to his statement about handout. This is really important to understand. Our society shapes our language. And the idea, the fact, it's so sad. The fact that people feel that they're getting a handout makes them feel like shit. And the idea of a handout, the idea called a handout is couched in capitalism. If you're not working, you're getting a freaking handout. And if you're getting a handout, you suck as a human being. That's what that means. That's what that means. And so in Copiosis, we eliminate that's an indoctrination trope, by the way. So in Copiosis, we eliminate these indoctrination tropes. We eliminate the tropes that we have digested and integrated into the fabric of our being, not realizing that those tropes come from capitalism. And so Copiosis is designed to eliminate that stuff so that you can see that giving something to somebody is not a handout, for God's sakes. It is an expression of art. You are sharing your art, your artistic expression, whether it's a smile or a piece of code or a piece of food. You are expressing yourself to that other person, and you're breathing life into that human being by virtue of giving that person a gift. That is value. It is not a handout.
Okay, I'll accept that.
That's good because we're really running out of time now.
Okay.
So, Nuno, do you have a question that you would like to pose, or can I close up with my questions?
No, actually, I don't have a question. I was thinking in seeing the net benefit calculation, for instance, the document, and I was looking forward to see the review of this presentation. I advancedly say it was a very good presentation. Copiosis is a very well established transition. And thank you a lot, and congratulations for the presenter.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nuno.
Thank you so much. I'd be happy to come back and talk in more detail about how the calculation works if you want. But that's a really deep conversation.
Okay, then, Erica, did you want to say anything? I know you normally don't talk, but if you'd like to ask something. No? Okay. Now, I'm not going to ask all of my 6 pages. And fortunately, a lot of the points have already been talked about. One thing that I want to mention is when you talk about the oneness that underlies everything, I just want to say that's what we talk about in RBE and in TVP and Zeitgeist as the holism. So that holistic element, that's definitely there. That's something that we can also recognize. The luxuries, that's a tricky subject. I think you could be here for an entire meeting just talking about that. So I'm going to leave that for what it is. What I think is what for me seems essential is the manner that this implementation is going to be working to move people from an extrinsic motivation to an intrinsic motivation. And that's really the big obstacle. In RBE, yes, we always talk about people not having to work because they just do what they're, basically what you say, what they're born to do, but we pursue our passion, what it is. But we're in a society, we are conditioned to need rewards, to need validation, to need money, to need luxuries and stuff. And so that's what I see, that this is a practical attempt to move from the one kind of way of thinking into another. The other thing that for me is you had a slide about the 7 deadly sins, and I didn't jot them all down, but I think, again, these are points, again, that could definitely be just handled in a separate session. Again, these 7 things are things that come up in RBE all the time, like debt and its instruments, the lag of psychological conditioning, the lag in technology, accepting technology, embracing technology. Those are all things that we recognize. The one point that I will raise just to close the meeting, and it's probably a big mistake of me to do so, but you mentioned greed as a positive force. I'd be interested in a little bit of explanation of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, right? So if you haven't guessed already, a lot of copiosis is informed by non-physical reality, what people call spirituality. The mechanism of greed is the process through which matter is created. Because if you notice in your own human behavior, when a desire is satisfied, a new desire shows up. It is the continual creation of desire that fuels your existence in physical reality. It is that same fuel that creates physical matter. So the problem with greed is that greed is expressed inside of debt-based monetary systems. Greed in and of itself is what creates our reality. And so the question is not how do you eliminate greed, because it is greed being defined as the aggressive force that all that is uses to create physical matter, including physical beings. So the question isn't eliminating greed, because you can't. The question is, how do you turn it into the virtue that it is? And you do that by creating a system whereby greed cannot be used as an oppressive tool. And you do that by creating a context in which greed operates in a condition of abundance. Because in a condition of abundance, people don't see scarcity and they don't see disconnection from all that is, or their oneness or holism. And in that context, they can't possibly act in ways that harm other people. The only reason why we see people harming other people is because they have disconnected themselves from their stream of oneness. It's the only reason. And so if that's true, and it is, then greed is a virtue, as is everything else about humanity, including selfishness. Because, and just real quickly, I'll end by saying, because when you act selfishly, you cannot help but benefit those around you, because all that is functions in a way that allows everybody to get what they want in the moment they're existing, no matter what the circumstance is.
Okay, I think I understand you there. In any case, in terms of physics, what you talk about, what causes matter to actually come into existence, has to do with attraction, the attraction between quarks, protons, leptons, and all of that. So that's basic. The greed is just a word for the essential energy of attraction, is basically what I hear you saying. Okay,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your really interesting presentation. And I think you've given a lot of us something to think about. I think it's a really interesting plan, and I mean that in the highest sense of the word. So this is, really what we need to look at, all of us, is how do we get from here to there? And you've got a really well thought out plan here, and I'm really happy that you came to talk to us about that.
It's my pleasure. Happy to come back anytime.
Okay. For the rest of you, you know that next month on the 17th of December, we're getting together for the memorial meeting for the passing of Jacques. Well, I guess that's all I have to say for today. Perry, thank you. Thank you for everybody that was here, and look forward to seeing you all again. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
See you
Bye.
guys.